Hello and welcome. My name is Karima Akila, and it is my privilege to present this series to you, Shopping for Next School Year. Looking for the right curriculum, the right school that will give you what you really want. Learn how self-directed learning or unschooling can do that. So today we are going to discuss self-directed learning in math. Who is ever really going to want to learn algebra? I get asked this all of the time. And so I am excited to share with you what I have found to be true. A little bit about me. The picture on the left was taken maybe about 10 years ago now. And as you can see, I have 6 kids. I have been homeschooling for, the oldest is now 22. So that's how long I've been homeschooling. If you want to start, when he began kindergarten, then you can do the math. That really is a picture of what our family looked like at that time. There was always somebody adding a little spice to the mix. The little one whose face I'm holding right there. There was always someone, expressing their emotion. My daughter sitting on my husband's lap, who was not happy about taking this photo. I was a Maryland public school teacher, and before the oldest boy in the back was born. And when he was born, I became a stay-at-home mom. His birthday was in December. And so because of that, he would not have been able to begin kindergarten until he was almost 6 years old. And he was already reading by the time he was 4. So that is really why we began homeschooling at that time, because he was already well ahead. And at that time, they were not allowing children to test into the next grade. So I really did a good job of recreating school at home. And I did that for a long time until I couldn't do it anymore. Until burnout and depression, because I always felt like I was behind. I felt like I was always had to play catch up, with birthing and nursing babies and toddlers on the floor and preschoolers, crawling around, and elementary age kids, trying to listen to a lesson. It just wasn't working. So I began looking into this thing that I said I would never do, called unschooling. And lo and behold, it was the thing that saved everything, saved my sanity, and really allowed my children to flourish into their gifts. And that's a picture of us on the right. Maybe about 6 years ago now, shortly after we had begun unschooling, maybe a couple of years after, my husband was diagnosed with leukemia. And so after a year of fighting cancer, and during that time, I would take him an hour away to the hospital, and we would stay for about 4 hours, and then we would come back. So that's 6 hours out of the day, every other day, when I was not at home. By that time, my older ones were teenagers and more than capable of watching their younger siblings for me. And that really allowed our unschooling journey to take root, because I wasn't there to mess it up. So a year of that, and then my husband passed away in 2016. And during that time, looking back now, I can say I'm extremely grateful that we were unschooling, because it allowed us the freedom, the flexibility to grieve and to determine what life would be moving forward. So fast forward now, look at these guys. The little dude that was on my lap then, he's still kind of on my lap now. He's now 10, and the oldest is 22, and all of those guys in the middle. I have graduated 2 from unschooling, and the third, the tall guy in the back, he graduates. He can graduate now if he's ready, or next month. And that is how it started, and this is how it is going. As a result of our journey, I started consulting families on how to unschool, and through that experience led me to create the Genius School, which you hear about at the end. Parents were asking me, this is great, this is exactly what my kid needs, but I have to go to work. Can you start a school that would allow my kid to do this? And at first I said, nope, can't do that. Don't want to do that. That sounds like a lot of work. But I could not ignore what parents were asking. And so I eventually said yes. And now it has become the greatest passion of my life. And I'll share more about that towards the end. So this whole entire, who's really going to want to learn math stuff, right? Well, let's first look at what your state requires and says that you have to do for math. So this is Homeschooling Legal Defense Act, and I come here to their site often to guide parents on looking at what their state says. So if you notice this color, this darker, I don't know what color that's supposed to be, blue maybe, indicates states where there is no notice required. And then you have low regulation, moderate regulation, and high regulation. So let me go to a high regulation state such as Pennsylvania. I'm very familiar with Pennsylvania. I used to we lived there, so I had to abide by their laws. And you can come back and watch the video. They do a really good job of explaining how this is supposed to look and work. So let's go down to the subjects. Let's see, where would that be? I think this is it. So we're not going to go into how you go about it, but I just wanted to look at this. Some states spell out exactly what it is that they want students to do. Some states leave it a little vague. So in the area of math, as you can see for K through 6, Pennsylvania just says arithmetic. And then they have the other subject matters there. But now look at what they say here in 7 through 12. They include general mathematics, algebra, and geometry. And if you really were to look at the law of the specific wording of the law of Pennsylvania, actually literally says some algebra and some geometry. Very interesting, right? Some algebra and some geometry. So that's Pennsylvania. Now let's take a look at Georgia, where I am now. Let's see, let's look at state mandated subjects. Let's see what they say. And you'll get an idea of if there's any variance or not. Blah, blah, blah. It says teach the required subjects. Your home study program must include a basic educational program that includes, but is not limited to, reading, language arts, mathematics, social studies, and science. And so there you have it. It's very, very vague. It does not give you specific subject matter. And I show you that for a reason, because I don't want you to think that that the state is looking for the same objectives that its own schools have to teach, meaning subjects, yes, the nitty-gritty objectives, not necessarily, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. So check out your state, write down this site, hslda.org, and you can check out what your state says about homeschooling. So let's see. What do we have next? All right. What is your biggest fear about self-directed learning in math? Now, let me tell you what I've heard. I've heard parents say to me that their biggest fear is, well, who is really going to want to do algebra? Or when is my kid going to really want to do fractions? Like, or decimals rounded to the nearest 10,000th. Like, when are they really going to want to do that? If I am following the principles of self-directed learning, and if the principles of self-directed learning say that I follow the interests of my children, right? Then, when are my kids really actually going to really want to do that kind of stuff? And I understand your concern, and your concerns are valid. So take a minute and jot down on a piece of paper what your biggest fears are about self-directed learning and math. And I'll give you just a few seconds to do so. So whatever you wrote down or whatever you're thinking about, deschooling, the process of deschooling solves most of those concerns. Now, if you have heard of what deschooling is, if you think you know, okay, sit tight, and let's see how what it is you wrote down and what your concerns are can be resolved through the deschooling process. What do I mean when I say deschooling? And yes, unschooling does begin with the deschooling process. So first of all, a definition of self-directed learning. Self-directed learning or unschooling is non-compulsory learning. That's probably the part when it comes to math that people are most afraid about. Like if I don't force these kids to learn decimals, percents, and fractions, when will they ever want to on their own? Self-directed learning is built on the belief that humans will acquire knowledge as a result of curiosity or when they see the relevance of such knowledge. Will your kids ever be curious about fractions? Will they ever be curious about centimeters and millimeters? Or will they ever see the relevance? Will your kids ever see the need to know how to do long division? That's probably the part that trips you up, the part that you're concerned about. The self guides the when, what, and how of this acquisition, thus making the child the curriculum. If the word curriculum means guide, then the child becomes the guide as to when something is learned, how something is learned, with what is learned, and then why is it learned, right? And that I think is the biggest hangup, that parents are afraid my kid is not ever going to be curious to learn these things, or nor will they ever see the relevance of learning them. Now, if you really are honest with yourself, many parents that I've spoken to, myself included, I talk to myself, yes, I do. Many parents say and admit that a lot of what they've learned in school, they do not see as relevant in their adult life. But they still hold on to these things that we have learned in school. I had a talk with a parent just the other day when they felt anger at the fact that they had to go through this K through 12 experience and then college, and then most of that was not relevant to what they're actually using. And they were they were resentful of the fact that their children are now able to learn in freedom, bypassing all of that stuff that wasn't relevant, able to learn from pure curiosity or when it is relevant. And they, as the adult, realized that a lot of their time was wasted. So this is a definition of unschooling. The main word in unschooling and self-directed learning is non-compulsory learning. That is the main basis to understand. You'll talk to many different people, and many different people will tell you, oh, it's interest-led learning, which it is very much interest-led learning, or it is delight-driven learning, delight-driven learning. We follow the delights of the child. What the child delights in is what drives what they learn. But at the basis of it, it is not forcing someone to learn something and by a certain time frame. So then how do we get to this wonderful world called self-directed learning, where we turn away from schoolish expectations, cross over this lovely bridge into the land and world of self-directed learning? Well, that bridge is called deschooling. The process of turning away from schoolish expectations towards unschooling is deschooling. Now, what is deschooling? This is where I'm going to turn to Akilah Richards' book. If you are not familiar, you should be. Her book, oh shoot, I don't have it with me right here. I was going to show you a picture, but it's called Raising Free People, and she has a podcast called Fare of the Free Child. Please, please, please check out her work. This is her definition of deschooling as defined in her book. She defines it as shredding the programming and habits that resulted from other people's agency over your time, body, thoughts, or actions. Designing and practicing beliefs that align with your desire to thrive, be happy, and succeed. So remember when we talked about those schoolish expectations? When you begin to turn away from everything that a school or a school mentality would expect your child to learn, you are actually beginning the deschooling process. Now, some of us may only have one big toe on that bridge, and that's okay. That is one big toe more than what was there before, and we'll take it, right? But yes, it is the idea of getting rid of someone else saying what it is that you should do, when you should do it, how you should do it, and why. Now, she goes on to use this quote, which when I first heard it, it struck me profoundly. She says, post-colonial parenting made and makes sense to me because it says simply, how I parent is heavily informed my decolonization work. If I viewed my children as fertile land to shape and design without the partnership of their own choices and curiosities, then I would be colonizing that land, those children. I would be the oppressor in this instance. So it is the idea of not doing things to children without their consent, not forcing a child to learn something by a certain time simply because that is what I want them to do, or that is what the curriculum says that they should do. Instead, it is a partnership. It is together working with this child to understand what is important to them. When does this topic of math become something that is relevant to them? Or, and this is the sweet part, where are they ever curious about it? And then to lay before them options that they can choose to follow those curiosities. Now, something important before we get into the nuts and bolts of exactly what does unschooling math look like. Unschooling goes from the whole world as your classroom. That is what unschooling is. It allows you to learn using anything, and everything becomes your teacher. The whole world is your classroom. So you learn from the whole of something. School puts it back into parts. School puts it back into parts. The subjects must be there, and that is the biggest difference that there is to reconcile. That school goes from parts to whole. So I want to read you this quote from this book. The book is called The Teenage Liberation Handbook by Grace Lewin. And this is chapter 22. And she goes on to say this. Let me read it to you. Let's see. Many of us don't even know what math is. We confuse it with arithmetic and forget that it's more about logic and about analyzing and recognizing patterns. As Patricia Clark Kinshaft says in her wonderful book, Math Power, computation, routine calculation, is to mathematics as spelling is to literature. It has value in itself, but it is no substitute for the real thing. And then Aaron Falbell says, school math is very different from real math. I'm gonna read that again. School math is very different from real math. School math is mostly about computation or arithmetic and symbol manipulation techniques. By themselves, these things can be awfully boring. Real mathematicians do not sit around all day doing school math. School has concentrated on this one tiny part of mathematics because, one, it can be easily graded, and two, most school teachers themselves are not mathematicians and have little or no idea what mathematics is really about or what real mathematicians do. When I first read that, this is what that book looks like, the Liberation Handbook. When I first read that quote, it began to unravel my ideal of math, because it was this right here. It was demonstrating that we have taken the whole world of math. The whole world is built upon math, and we've taken it down to these little teeny tiny little subjects. And what happens when we do that is that the whole marvel and wonder of math is lost. It's like the analogy that they use there. What if you only learned spelling, but no one ever allowed you to fall in love with literature? All you saw were just the words spelled. But you never saw how once you spell those words correctly and you put them together in meaningful sentences, and then you put those sentences together in paragraphs and paragraphs into larger paragraphs and works and bodies of literature, how you have created something masterful. But what do? I'm sorry, you spelled the word wrong right there. Go back and correct your spelling. That's what we do with math. We're so focused on the grammar of math that we miss the whole body of literature of math. I hope you can catch that analogy, because that is the basis for how you can look at math differently. And it allows you the freedom to enjoy the world of math versus just this teeny tiny little parts. So what do I mean by that? All right, so if you have little ones, this is an idea, this is a way that you could use math. I tell people, especially if you were like me, if you were a curriculum junkie like I used to be, then use your curriculum as a crutch, because you're going to use it anyway. All right, and what do I mean by that? Well, let's see if this link will work for us. All right, this is what I mean. This was my old curriculum back in the day, Saxon Math, right? Grades kindergarten through 8th, and this is a scope and sequence. Every curriculum has a scope and a sequence. It basically just lays out what it is that you're going to learn. So here are the 9 different topics that are displayed here: numbers and operations, measurement, geometry, patterns, algebra and functions, statistics, data analysis and probability, problem solving, communication, mathematical reasoning, and connections. And then they go on to list their different age or grades, and then the different objectives. Now, if you have little ones, right, this is pretty simple, right? Count by 1, counts backwards, count by 2s and 5s, and skip counts all of the numbers, right? Writes numbers using words. Now, what do I mean by use your curriculum as a crutch? What I mean by that is, if you are just starting deschooling and you only have your big toe on the bridge and you have a whole nother foot in the world of schoolish expectations, right? But there's something about this land of unschooling that's calling your name. That's how I was, right? Then start wherever you are and allow increased amounts of freedom as you go along. So what do I mean by that? Look at your curriculum. You're looking at it anyway. You're worried about it. It haunts you. If you're anything like me, my curriculum would be talking to me in my sleep. It would say, you know, you're supposed to be on lesson 117, but you're only on lesson 54. You know you're behind, right? But you want to do this unschooling thing. Oh, the parent-teacher conferences were fierce. So what do I mean by that? Grab your curriculum and look at it. So let's pretend that you have a little one, right? Who is, say, 7 years old or so in the 2nd grade. And let's say that this is what you were supposed to do today, count by 1,000s, let's just say. What I'm suggesting that you do is that you look at your curriculum, look at the objective that you were supposed to teach today, and then write it down on a slip of paper if you have to, put it in your phone, and then close your curriculum and then go play with your kids. And look and see where does, now hear me carefully, where does real life present this little part? Where does the whole of the world represent an opportunity for them to engage? I didn't say learn, but engage with counting by 1,000s. Maybe you're watching something on the news. Maybe they're playing Minecraft, or maybe they're playing Roblox, and they have, 10,000 and some odd coin, and you can count with them, say, oh, you have 10,000 coin, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. And you have just exposed this objective. You have taught. I didn't say anything about them learning, but I did say that you have taught. Now, why is that a difference? It's a difference because your teaching does not equal learning. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can say that again, because this is pivotal. Your teaching does not equate to learning. Just like your cooking does not equate to eating. Just because you cook doesn't mean that people are going to eat. They can if they are hungry, right? You can teach all day, but that doesn't mean someone's going to learn. They can if they are curious, and if it is relevant to them, then they will acquire that knowledge. Then they will let it in. All right. So what I'm saying that you do is that when you look at your curriculum, you understand that you are simply using these objectives as a guide. And on the deschooling plan, it is really only there to make you feel better. That's it. Because if your kid doesn't care about counting by 1,000s, guess what? They're going to look at you while you're skip counting by 1,000. They're going to say, okay, and go right back to what they're doing. It's all about if they are curious or if they see that as relevant, but it will ease your anxiety. I want to be crystal clear about that. All right, let's see. Let's scroll up and find something else. Let's go up to, I know it's fun in games when they're little, right? But when we get, to older kids, that's when, the anxiety comes in for real, because we're like, wait, they're supposed to be big kids now, right? Doing real math. Okay, let's see. Ooh, graphing. Graphs large numbers on a number line. Your kid might have a need to do that. Look for that in real life. You might be watching the news and there may be a chart that comes up and that's a graph. And you might simply say, hey, that's a pie chart. Or hey, that's a number graph, or line graph rather. It's a line graph. You taught it, you expressed it, right? And if they were listening, they heard it, they were exposed. That doesn't necessarily mean that they learned. Math is everywhere. Remember the world? All right, so if you just simply look for it, you'll find it. Matter of fact, I'm sitting here at my table and there is a newspaper circular. Well, let's see what's on sale that my family would like to eat. Let's see, I see Cosmic Crisp apples. We've never had them before, but according to this article, they are $1.49. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? They were originally $2.98 per 2-pound bag. So if it's time to go grocery shopping, you might whip out the circular and you might tell your kids, like I told my kids, because I was tired of trying to read their minds, right? Trying to figure out what they wanted to eat. So I would say, okay, you guys go figure out what you want to eat. Everybody take the circular, circle what you want. What else is on here? Oh, they have orange juice, $1.79, right? 52 ounces. Okay, circle what you want and then total it up. Oh, but make sure that you check, right? Only the 52-ounce orange juice is on sale, not the 74. Oh, mine was ounces. Oh, that's a measurement of the volume of the amount of orange juice inside of the container. You see how that works? Mm-hmm. So math is everywhere. You already use it. Your kids are already using it in the whole world that they live in. It's just simply a matter of you pointing it out. All right, so play games with your younger ones. Play I Spy with math objectives if you want. You can even start out by saying, hey guys, guess what? We're going to explore math a little differently. Instead of sitting down at the table like we used to do math or like you used to do it in school. Instead, in this bowl or in this brown paper bag, I have a couple of strips of math objectives, and let's see if we can find it. All right, let's play I Spy. And you might pull out that objective that says skip counting by 3. And then go around the house. Where can you find different things? Oh, look at my window right there. My window pane is broken up into 3. I can skip count by 3. 3, 6, 9. Playing I Spy with math objectives, right? Very random, very fun. And of course, all of this is if your child allows, right? If they say yes to this idea. So pay attention to the math your kids use every single day, but please be careful not to turn it into a learning opportunity. Nobody wants that. Video game math. I can't tell you how many times Roblox has been used to calculate, let's see, we've learned addition and subtraction with regrouping, decimals with Roblox math. And like I just said, shopping, pumping gas is where you learn decimals, right? Have your kid come outside, maybe if they're too young to pump the gas, but look from the car. Hey, look, mom's going to get $20 worth of gas. How many, what is gas sold in? Why did my mind just go to a blank? How How many gallons? How many gallons do you think that will be? That's take a numbers from the kids. How many do you think the car holds? Okay, how many do you think? All right, let's see how much $20 will get us. And then right there, you are showing them, decimals to the thousandth place, right? Mile markers, that's a great one while you're driving. And then GPS. When you put on Waze or whatever your GPS is, if you have it on your phone, hand it to your kid and have them, turn the volume down, especially if you know where you're going. Don't mess around, get lost. But have your kid tell you, hey, mom, turn in 3.9 miles. Oh, 3.9 miles? That's almost 4 miles, isn't it? So do you see how math is everywhere and how you use it all the time? So the idea here is you are simply just uncovering what is already there. You are simply just exposing your children to the whole world of math that is already there. But what about? There's always a but what. Let me make sure I didn't skip a page. Yep, there's always a but what. There's always a yeah, but, and I already know what you're saying. You're already saying, but the title of this talk was, who's ever going to want to do algebra? So let's get to that, shall we? In order to do that, I want to show you, I'm going to take some time, about 11 minutes, to show you this TED Talk that completely changed my life. Now, when I click on this is on YouTube, so hopefully the video might play right away. If not, then I will chit chat a little bit more about why this was important to me. This video did it. Oh, I guess we got to watch an ad for a hot second. Sorry, guys. Anybody have a Peloton bike? Okay, here we go.
Thank you. Hello, my name is John Bennett, and I am a middle school and high school math teacher. But I have to tell you something. I don't think what I teach is very important. In fact, if it were up to me, I would no longer require math to be taught, or I should say required, in middle school and high school. Now, some of you may not agree with me, and that's okay, but that's what this is all about, right? So my attitude wasn't always this way. In fact, it's evolved over time. And I want to share with you my story of how it evolved and also what we can do about it, my solution. That'll come at the end. It all started with what I call the big question. All my students ask me this every year. Mr. B, when are we going to use this stuff in like real life, this math stuff? Yeah, I had to come up with an answer with that. So I came up with one. I was a green math teacher. I was full of optimism. I was like a superhero. I was like, math man. I was going to convince them that math is everywhere. It is in the spiral of the seeds of a sunflower and the same spiral in galaxies. It's the same spiral. It's a mathematical curve that's connected to something called the golden ratio, which I think is pretty cool. But alas, that was not met by my students, but that's okay, because I had another trick up my sleeve, another answer to the big question, and that was math is helpful. Scientists would not be able to use the tool of mathematics to design the iPhone, internet in your pocket, man, Golden Gate Bridge, cloning a sheep. You couldn't have that without math, right, guys? Guys? Hello? Is this thing on? Yeah, whatever, math, man. So that didn't go over big. So I had to find another way to connect my students to this math stuff. This stuff wasn't working. I know. I could pick something they could relate to. You might end up choosing a job that requires some math, Yeah, like I'm going to do a job that requires this stuff. But I would tell them, what, maybe not now, but maybe, who knows, 10 years down the line, you might pick something. You might want to be an engineer or something. And you can do it, man. So that's what I became. You can do it, man. I know you can, and I'm going to help you. And through the years, students would come back to me, my old students, through emails, and they would stop by the old school, and they say, hey, Mr. B, how's it going? I'm like, hey, how's that math? You still using it, right? No, not really. 4 of them said yes. Guess what they all do? Thank you, they're math teachers. So I began to think, they're not really using this stuff. But don't get me wrong, if a student comes up to me and says, yo, Mr. B, I want to be an engineer. I want to use this math stuff. I like it. I like math. I like science. I want to go for it. I would stop at nothing to make sure that kid got the resources that he or she needed. But think about it for a second. 300 million people in the United States, 1.5 million engineers. That's 0.5%. Let's double that number. For every engineer, let's say there's another person who uses some math in his or her job. That's still only 1%. Whoa, how many percent does that make of that people that don't need higher math? You guessed it, 99% of us don't need it. So I had to come up with something better. Another answer to this, the big question, when am I going to use this math stuff in real life? And I went to the dark side of the force. And I used fear. I said, you know what? Guess what? You're on a certain path. Yes, you are. You're on the dark side of the force. And what that dark side is all about is you got to get good grades now in high school. You got to do math to get that. You got to do well on the SATs, everyone all together now. You got to get good grades in high school so you can get a good college. You got to get a good college to get yourself a good job. You got to get a good job to get good money, and good money to be happy and happy, successful. Right, guys? I had the answer to the question, and I had them in the palm of my hand. Yes, that's the answer I'm going to use from now on, I said. But you know what? It didn't really sit right here. It didn't sit right. It worked. And I started talking to my buddies. Hey, how's it going? Facebook, high school reunions. And I realized that the guys who got these high, and women too, got the high GPAs, went to the good colleges, weren't necessarily the most successful, whatever that means to you. In fact, the success didn't depend on what college they went to or even if they went to college. Well, maybe it's about the SATs. That's it. The SATs will predict how successful my kids will be in the future, right? Well, I'm going to defer to the well-known educational reformer, Alfie Kohn. 10 years ago, he said this: the SAT is a measure of resources more than of reasoning. Year after year, the College Board's own statistic depict a virtually linear correlation between SAT scores and family income. Bottom line, SATs measure how rich the guy's parents are, and that's it. So this answer I had in my pocket, I had to let it go. It worked, but I had to let it go. So I had to think of something else. And that's when I shifted. I stopped trying to connect math with my students, and I just started to connect with them. Imagine that. And when I did, they started opening up to me and talking to me about how much math was stressing them out. It does. I turned into, I'm just here to help, man. I'm going to get you through this painful part of your life as painlessly as possible. And they started opening up to me, and they started telling me their stories. And I hate to break it to you, but the story I heard most, I call the Mr. Johnson story. You know, Mr. B, they said, I used to be pretty good at math. You know, I was actually like, I liked it until I had Mr. Johnson in third grade. And I know, he made me feel stupid and told me I couldn't do it. And ever since then, I've never really liked or been good at it. I've heard that story far too many times. My students, other students, their parents, adults, my teachers at school. It's tragic. It shouldn't be. Because these stressed out kids become stressed adults. Do you know that in the last 40 years, we've had a term called math anxiety? I'm not kidding. Do you know that there are books and books about math anxiety? You're laughing, but I ain't kidding. I didn't make this stuff up. You go Google this and you will find dozens of books. Here are a few of my favorite titles. Conquering Math Anxiety. You need Math Man for that. Math, a 4-letter word. And my personal favorite, Math Doesn't Suck. Something's got to change about this. Do you see English anxiety or Spanish anxiety or whatever? No. Math anxiety for 40 years, just the term has been around. If I were smart, I would be some enterprising young pharmaceutical company guy, and I would say, with all the Prozac and Zoloft that's going on, Mathman would design Algebrex to help reduce math anxiety, but watch out for the possible side effects: nausea, vomiting, high blood pressure, and insomnia due to sudden and unexplainable inability to count sheep. I know I'm joking about that, but I've met adults with this. It's no joke. I just bring up math, and they want to confess everything. They're shaking. I know it sounds funny, but it's a real deal. It's not the fakey. So once again, back to my question: how was I going to answer that question? Are we going to want to use this stuff in real life? And I had to reach down to the depths of my soul to come up with an answer that felt right and worked. And you know what I said? I said, you know what? You won't. I needed a forklift to pick up the jaws off the desks and put them back in their heads, because they were amazed that a guy like me would actually admit that we don't actually need higher math in real life. Imagine that. So I had to answer the question myself. When do you use math in real life? Think about it for a second. First thing I bet you came up to your mind was money, right? Yeah, financial stuff, budget, taxes, balancing your checkbook. I get that. Well, what do you need for that? You need counting, estimating, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Decimals, the 2 decimal places, not rounding to the nearest 10,000th place or something like that. We don't need that. Okay, what else? Maybe you do some cooking or carpentry and you need some basic fractions. Basic fractions, not 2/5 plus 3/7 and common denominator and blah, 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 which I dish out every single year. We don't need that anymore. You throw in 20% off at the mall, 15% tip at a restaurant, you need some basic percentages, and that is it. How old were you when you learned this stuff? Thank you. 10. I usually get the answer around 10. So just for the sake of argument, let's say at the end of elementary school, you have learned all the math that you will need in real life. Then what the heck are we learning this middle school and high school math stuff for? It's got to go. Do you agree with me? Maybe. At least if you don't, maybe you'll at least think about it. Think about it. This is coming from a math teacher. Whoa, okay? So what's the answer? No, excuse me. Before I answer what's the answer, I'm going to save that for the end. Then why are we still teaching this algebra stuff? Here's why. Math gives us 2 different kinds of reasoning, deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. That's the part that we take away from math. Deductive reasoning is a series of connected logical steps that leads to conclusion. For example, if I don't hang out with my friends after school, I'll go to the library and study. If I go to study, I'm going to get an A on the test. If I get an A on the test, mom's going to be happy. Therefore, if I don't hang out with my friends at the mall after school, my mom won't be happy. Deductive reasoning, we need that, we use that in everyday life. Inductive reasoning is where we look at data, we find a pattern, and then we make a generalization based on the data. If I cram for my science test and get an A, If I cram next day for my English test and get an A, hey, this is working, isn't it? Therefore, it works all the time. Now, that's not foolproof, but that is a kind of reasoning that we use. Math gives us those same kinds of reasoning. Here's an example of deductive reasoning in math. If 2x minus 1 equals 9, then therefore 2x must equal 10, therefore x equals 5. We all get that. But your math teacher gives you 20 million of those problems to do for homework the next day and expects you to make the inductive reasoning leap. Every time I see a problem like that, this is how I solve that. It's that leap, actually, which I find the most challenging as a math teacher. Not how to do one problem, but how to do them all that look kind of like that. But if there's a 0 next to the x, then the whole thing falls apart. So inductive reasoning doesn't stick all the time, but it is something what you use all the time. Is there an answer? Yes. Here it is. For the last 10 years in my math classrooms, I've been incorporating logic puzzles and games, I call them brain games, to help develop those analytical skills. If we were to incorporate this into our classroom, I am confident that we can reawaken these analytical, critical thinking skills that are lying dormant, that have been anesthetized by the standard curriculum. I am convinced, and I believe that if we make math no longer a required subject for middle school and high school, and you let the people who are connected to it, who want to take it, and those of us who don't, you let them play games and puzzles that help develop that cognitive reasoning skills, I am confident that these students will not only be fully equipped to handle life's challenges, but will be able to pursue their passions and fulfill their life's missions. Thank you very much.
What do you think about that? When I first saw that video, it completely changed everything, all of my expectations about math. I wish that I had been in his class because I was one of those kids that really could have benefited from those logic games and puzzles as early as 6th grade in middle school. And if I had 6 to 5 years of that, oh my. So notice what he said. He said, for people who are not interested in higher level math, for instance, if you know that you are not going to be an engineer, then obviously, you would not need to use that higher level math. But if you know that you are, like I have my 2 middle boys, one of whom knows he wants to be an engineer, and he is already right now teaching himself that higher level math. My daughter, who is an artist, she has no interest in that higher level math. Instead, she will maximize at the adult math that we all use, that she learned when she was 10. and that's it. So sit with that for a minute, wrestle with that, and email me and let me know your thoughts about that video. So the reason why I like that is because in the world of self-directed learning, that video gets at the heart and the root of what we've been talking about. It begins with the child. That's what he said. He said, I turned my attention to his students, to the child. Who is this child that is sitting in front of you? Do they already have a bent towards math? Do they already have a bent towards engineering type of interests? And then would those interests lead them to need higher level math? So let's think a little deeper. How can an unschooler get into college if they've never taken any formal math? I have read of families, guys, and I'm becoming one of those families, especially with my younger, well, the younger two kids, where there's been no formal math instruction at all. But the child has a desire to go to school, so they can choose to take a formal math course. You can purchase a curriculum. For my oldest, we were living in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania said that he needed a credit in geometry. And so what we did is I found this geometry called patty paper geometry, which, you know, frozen hamburgers when you buy them and it has the wax paper in between of all of the frozen patties. Well, this geometry course is built upon using clean wax paper squares and folding them to discover various different geometry objectives. And that's what he did. I hired a math tutor, and my son and a bunch of other kids who also needed some geometry, that's what they did. They folded paper and they were talking about whatever they were talking about, and that was his hands-on geometry course. There is a curriculum called Hands-on Algebra. I'm sorry, it's actually called Hands-on Equations, is the name of it, Hands-on Equations, which displays algebra for very young children to understand. So you can check that out. We've also used a video course. I think it's one from the Great Courses. They have an algebra course. And for our Pennsylvania credit, that's what the child watched. I want to be clear and say this as well. If you live in the state that requires these subjects and you have regulation in your state, then work with your student. If they have no interest in algebra, but it is required that you demonstrate that they've been exposed to some algebra, then work with your child to figure out, okay, what is the most painless way possible that we can meet this credit requirement? And then do that with them, do that together. And then dual enrollment. What I mean by that is while your child is still a homeschooler, before you graduate them, they can take courses at the community college. When we were living in Maryland, you simply take the test, take the placement test, and wherever you place, that's where you begin. If you need a non-credit math, back in my day, they called that remedial math. But if you needed a math course to get you up to speed, then that's where you started. Yes, you paid for it, but it's no different than if I would have paid for a math tutor. And then after they took that class, then they went on to take the next class that did earn them credit, and then they continued on. So plenty of families were able to earn their math, continue in college that way. All righty, let's see what's next. Oh, yes, very briefly. I told you that I would tell you a little bit about the Genius School, where your child gets to do math however they want to do it, all day. The Genius School is a brick and mortar and a virtual school. So we're offering both in-person and virtual in multiple cities across the country. And I hear rumblings of some families that may be interested internationally. So we'll do our best to make that happen. And we're looking for doors to open this fall. What does a day at the Genius School look like? Well, it begins with a spawn point. This happens both virtually and in person, where in the times there are approximate, where you will come in, and this is the only time that the children are grouped by ages at the spawn points. So you will go to your spawn point based upon your age, meet with your facilitator. And I do this so that the younger ones have a person, a place where they can voice their interests, their concerns. And then they set their intentions. What is it that they want to do that day? We can also look at the week calendar that was created last week. This calendar includes all of the different interest grouped corporations and what they are doing. So out of your local community, your local genius community, you might have an art corporation, an agriculture corporation, a Roblox corporation, a cooking corporation, whatever your kids are interested in. That's a Lego corporation. There might be a math corporation, if like my son would desire that, so that he can take his higher level math with a group of kids. And so the corporations set their schedule. And that schedule is there on a visible for the whole community to see. Also at the school meeting, we have a community awareness board where we discuss what are we aware of that's working and how to leverage it, and what are we aware of that's not working and how to mitigate it. And so that's visible as well. There's also what we call the 5-pillar invitation that is presented to students, where the 5 pillars are the 5 unique invitations that students receive at the Genius School, and I'll talk more about them in a minute. And then we close with our spawn point, where students come back to that age grouping and we talk about, we reflect upon the day. Did you meet your intention? And what are you grateful for? And all in between there, imagine the university model where students could be playing or reading or gaming, creating good experiences, which is part of our pillar 1, having family time or shopping or watching documentaries or taking a geometry course or part of the book club, and all sorts of things in between that the children find relevant. Oh, I see, I didn't include the 5 pillars. So let me do them here very briefly. The 5 pillars, again, are invitations that students have to engage. So pillar 1 is know thyself. Students are invited to create good experiences, things that they say they enjoy, would do well, and are proud of. So it's like passion projects, but deeper. So that's what students are invited to do. Again, not mandatory, not compulsory, not coerced to do, but invited to do every day. Pillar number 2, know thy source. Students are invited to learn about practices that help them maintain their mental and emotional well-being. These practices include different things like meditation, mindfulness, yoga, and other practices that would help a student to regenerate themselves and to maintain their mental and emotional well-being. Pillar 3, know how to make thine own money. Inside of those corporations, students will have an opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship. So if the art corporation decides that they need new materials, then how are they going to generate the capital in order to go and do that? Perhaps they will hold an art sale. Perhaps they will host an art teacher that other art students come and pay for, and they get a percentage of that to go and purchase their supplies. So entrepreneurship and job readiness are also introduced to students as part of pillar 3. Pillar 4 is know thy world, where students, middle school and high school age, are invited to travel autonomously in their local region. So students would research a skeleton itinerary that someone has created, and then they are invited to research it and add the times that they're going to meet, how much is admission. And then the idea is to walk out their front door and to make it to this destination, and just them and their peers view and tour this area, and then come back home and then document their time. Now, if you live in an area where there's no public transportation, then parents, of course, can drive them to that location, but then parents go get a cup of coffee. Allow the young people an opportunity to be independent. And then pillar number 5 is know how to serve your community with your genius. So up here at the Set the Week meeting, that is where someone from the community will come into the school and pitch us your problem. What is going on in our own backyard that the geniuses here can decide to apply their genius, the very best part of themselves, to create a solution. And then not just any solution, but a solution that is housed in a system that can then be reproduced as a business. And that is what is presented back to the community. So this is what's possible with the Genius School, and this is what a day could look like. Also with the Genius School, each Genius School location will have a maker space and a co-working space. And these spaces will be available in the daytime to Genius School students and their families, and then evenings and weekends in summer to the community at large. And this partnership helps to bring in additional revenue into the school and to offset tuition paid by parents. And when I say a makerspace, I do mean your traditional makerspace equipment, but I also mean anything that someone would need to make anything. If we have space for it, then let's do it. So can you imagine if we had a kitchen and a commercial grade kitchen, if you are to be a chef? If you are a mechanic, what if we had a old car or two out back that a local mechanic comes and offers classes to the mechanic corporation, right? And so now we have maker space for future auto mechanics. What if your future is to be a community, to be a politician? What do you need? Well, you might need a meeting space or a boardroom space, right? To listen to the needs of the community and to plan resolutions to community problems. Well, we'll have a space for you to do that. So imagine makerspace plus more. So this is what we are working towards. And we would love for you to join us. Genius director and facilitator positions are available. So go ahead and shoot me an email at info@thegeniusschool.org. And like I said, wherever there's an interest, that's where the Genius School can be. Now, what is our next how-to small group discussion? Let's see. And then we will remind ourselves with all that is available for you to check out. And please, if you find these videos helpful, please share them with your friends on your social media networks. So we've already discussed portfolios, homeschool reviews, documentation. We've discussed what is self-directed learning, deschooling and unschooling, self-directed learning and reading. How do you do that? How do you begin in your state? How do self-directed learners get into college? Self-directed learners and young ones, and then this one, of course, math. Oh, but look. But all they'll do is play video games. The real problem with that is it's the when and the what that trips you up. How self-directed learning benefits ADHD, dyslexia, ADD, autism, and gifted children, and then deschooling and decolonizing parenting. So these are the talks in this series. And so if you see something that interests you, please go ahead and complete that on the form and then shoot it back to me and let me know. And again, please do share it in your social media networks. And thank you so much for joining me for this self-directed learning talk on unschooling and math. I hope that you found something of value. And please let me know what you found to be most valuable during this talk, and then how I can better serve you in the future. Again, my name is Karima Akila. I am the founder of the Genius School, and it has been my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thank you so very much, and we'll meet again soon.